All right, now usually when I'm doing my show, I go and talk on a Tuesday to Tony Randle, and he gives us our letter from Wellington, and I will do so again, but I'll bring him into my show on breakfast this morning. Wellington City Council, Councillor Tony Randle joins us, our letter from Wellington. Tony, welcome to the show. You sent me an email about what you want to talk about, but I haven't got it.
Oh, that's interesting because you responded to it.
I know, and it's disappeared.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
So, I mean,
normally, that's worrying, isn't it? I respond. Tony tells me, he sends me an email. He says what he wants to talk about or what's going to be on the letter to Wellington. I respond to it, and then it disappears. That's spooky, Tony.
Just because you're not paranoid, it doesn't mean they're not out to get you, Michael.
That's exactly right. Yes. Well, you must have a feeling of paranoia about you, mustn't you? Because you, Tony, personally have been held accountable, along with others who are playing political games, for the dysfunctional state of the Wellington City Council. How do you respond to that?
Well, I'm not going to take credit for the dysfunctional side. I'm going to take credit for being the little boy who said the emperor's got no clothes. And,
okay.
Don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah. Well, you've got a Crown Observer now. Minister Simeon Brown, local government minister, put in a Crown Observer into Wellington City Council. Can I ask what you think a Crown Observer will do?
Oh, I think if we get the right person, that is someone with some good experience in local government and long-term plans and knowing how the money flows, then we could get a really good neutral advisor who will help ask the hard questions of the officers, the hard questions of councillors, saying, are you cutting to the core? Is this really financially sustainable, what you're trying to do? There's all sorts of ideas, of course, behind the scenes flying around about where we can find the savings to re-establish our emergency funding now that we're not selling the airport shares to do that. But we need to make sure that there's a big dose of common sense. So if we get a common sense observer, then it could be really good, and I would welcome it. If we get someone who comes in with their own political agenda, which I hope doesn't happen, but it is a political world, then it'd probably make things worse. But we're not quite there yet. We don't know who it's going to be.
No, and the other point that you make to me is that the Crown Observer doesn't just observe, do they? They can also, conduct conversations, examinations, if you like, with senior managers at the Wellington City Council too, can they?
They can, and they can ask for information in their own right. So they're almost, I believe, like another councillor, and they have those sort of rights. They can sit in with the mayor with key meetings behind the scenes and help. What they can't do is they can't make any decisions. They're there to observe, and I understand to report back to the minister about how we're going. And during the time period, I guess they will be our babysitter, I think was the term used last time, to make sure that we're doing it right this time. And in the end, I see this whole process really as us doing our long-term plan the right way that we wanted to be doing. We should have done it 6 months ago. And so I'm actually fine with what's happening.
So take me through this, please, because there's a lot of us confused Wellington confused us, full stop. And obviously the shenanigans at the Wellington City Council have appeared, although they've provided plenty of entertainment. Most of us are not much light because, let me get this right, the long-term plan was meant to be in operation now. Is that right? From the 1st of July?
Well, it is in operation now, and
it's just missing a bit.
It's just when we went and going back, it became apparent that a majority of elected members were against the airport sale, including myself, and mainly because they were going to spend the proceeds of the airport sale on more projects instead of keeping it aside for emergency funding, and the council still ramrodded through a long-term plan. Some people who opposed the airport sale still voted for the long-term plan because we didn't want to breach the Local Government Act, which says we have to have a long-term plan in place by the end of June. So we put it in, and many of those who voted against the airport sale voted for the long-term plan that included the airport sale. Mm. So it's that sort of contrary logic, I think, that's attracted the attention of Minister Brown and said, hey, you guys are doing it the wrong way. And so now we've got this Crown Observer, and now we've also got a commitment perhaps to do it right this way. And with the Crown Observer, they will make sure that this sort of convoluted logic doesn't turn up. And if it does, it'll be highlighted.
There's also been a Chamber of Commerce poll, as I understand it. Now, one of the things that listen, you'd have to live on another planet not to know what Wellington's like. It's very windy. It's the windiest city in the world. It's very hilly. There's not an awful lot of flat. But that hasn't stopped you deciding that cycleways as a council are the way to go. And the Chamber of Commerce has commissioned a poll that you've highlighted that shows that 76% of residents now oppose further spending on the cycleways, and that includes over half of Green Party supporters. Is that message getting through to your elected members?
I think it is. I mean, when we got Leah Wade-Brown as our first Green Mayor who cycled, cycleways were very popular in Wellington before we had them, largely. Now people have seen the reality of them, of the congestion, the removal of car parks, the horrible orange sticks all over the road, the speed bumps that come with them, the slowing down of emergency services. They're not so keen anymore because they've seen that, they've seen businesses go out of business because, cycleways have turned up outside and no one can get to the businesses. And the CBD, in general is already suffering. So I think people, the majority, were opposing cycleways probably from a couple of years ago, but the message didn't get through. And now it's getting through. And this poll reflects that.
Okay, is it a bit late, or we've
got a long-term amendment, so we've got an opportunity as well to say, actually, let's stop the funding on cycleways. That some of the money will take. There's about $105 million or $110 million in cycleway program. We can take that and we will just put that towards our emergency funding, and that will help replace some of the funds that we were going to get from the airport share sale. Because the objective is for us to have, let's say, $500 million in standby funding in case, we have an earthquake or a cyclone or something that really damages a city. We need that emergency funding. Wellington, of all the cities, might be the windiest city, but we're also one of the cities that's most vulnerable to a big event. And so emergency funding is absolutely critical. We're now going to find that money, and certainly cycleway money is top of my list, and I think it's the top of everyone's list at the moment, except the cyclists. Okay,
all right. The other thing, though, that strikes me about Wellington at the moment is that the Greens still, the left still runs your council. I guess I haven't seen any polls to suggest that there's going to be a change necessarily of that representation around the council table. Are there those in the wings who have indicated that they might stand for the mayoralty or leadership positions that are not currently represented around your table, Tony?
There's a couple of people who have already put their hands up to stand, notably Ray Chung, who did pretty well. He did as well as Andy Foster or Paul Eagle in the last election. But I think that there does need to be, I've got a lot of time for Ray, but I think there's also an opportunity for someone who perhaps has got a more in-depth set of experience that could, perhaps step forward and control the tiller on this ship as we hopefully turn away from the rocks of financial. We've got some hard decisions to make around our finances, and something's got to give.